All right. Welcome to today's hybrid workshop, Decarbonizing NYC Summer of Solar. We're so excited to have you all join us here today. And NYC Accelerator is very grateful to our host today, Andromeda Advantage. We just heard a word from Spiro Marcados. And I would also like to extend a special thank you to Maurice Davidson and Alex Kornacki for helping us get set up in this beautiful facility here today. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Today's webinar workshop, it's a hybrid event, so we will be recording this and we will be distributing that link tomorrow for anyone who wasn't able to join or has to leave early. Second, all virtual attendees will be muted throughout the event. You will not be able to come off mute or come on camera. So for those of you who are joining us online, please use the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will have time throughout today's presentation to address your questions. Third and finally, if you indicated interest in a free solar feasibility assessment with NYC Accelerator, upon registering for this event, we are making our way through that list and conducting outreach to you all. However, if you did not yet indicate interest in a solar feasibility assessment, but you would like one, we will drop a link in the chat and we will make an announcement in the event in just a few minutes, and there will be a form you can fill out and then we will be in touch with you. All right, and without further ado, we are going to get started today. So we have a great presentation lined up. Our presenters, Jose Galvez Contreras and Simon Mugo, will introduce you to NYC Accelerator, then move on to discussing all things solar, solar in NYC, technology and viability, cost and savings, and then we'll go through a few case studies of projects we've actually done. We will save time at the end for questions, but we'll also have opportunities to address questions sprinkled throughout the presentation. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Simon.
Thanks, Natasha. Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Mugo. I'm the Deputy Program Manager for the New York City Accelerator Program. And I think Natasha gave us a brief overview, but just to recap, during today's event, I'll provide an overview of the accelerator, give you a sense of what services we offer and how we can help you in your building. We'll also get into an introduction to solar in New York, just give you some more information about how solar works in New York, as well as how the incentives are structured in New York City specifically. And then we'll cover some of the costs and savings potential as it relates to solar PV. And then we'll cover some case studies and have some time at the end for Q&A. So that said, I just want to start off with a brief program overview about the New York City Accelerator Program. If you're not familiar, the program is a city-backed program that provides free technical assistance to building owners to enable them to perform building upgrades, to reduce their energy use, as well as to meet local law compliance. Our program is also supportive of enabling you to access financial incentives. These are incentives that are provided by either the utilities, whether it's Con Ed and National Grid, as well as NYSERDA, which is the state, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. We also provide and facilitate access to financing. This is primarily through the New York City Accelerator PACE program, or Property Assessed Clean Energy. And this is a financing vehicle that was recently launched that allows you to pay for energy efficiency upgrades and renewable energy such as solar, and then pay that back through your property taxes. And lastly, the program facilitates access to service providers. So we have a network of contractors who are licensed and skilled enough to perform the energy efficiency measures in your building to help you reduce your carbon emissions as well as reduce your energy use. We also offer online training, and this is at no cost to any New Yorker. And these trainings cover energy efficiency and renewable energy, as well as covering operations and maintenance. So giving you tips and skills to operate your building as efficiently as you can. Can you hear me? Well, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. And so in terms of how the accelerator program works and who's eligible, so the program, as I mentioned, is a free, no-cost service to any building stakeholder in New York, whether you're a property manager, a tenant, and anyone who has a relation to a building. We typically service or provide services to buildings that are 5,000 square feet and above. However, we do have partner organizations that serve buildings that are smaller than that. So if you're interested in receiving services from us and your building is below that 5,000 square foot threshold, you can still get in touch and we'll point you to the appropriate organizations. In terms of how the program works, typically you would get in contact with the accelerator through email or through our general hotline. We would then pair you with a dedicated account manager who will really be your point of contact from start to finish. So they would be able to provide you with objective and customized advice. And this is advice that's customized to your specific needs as well as your building needs. In terms of the cost, I think I've covered this previously. There's no cost to receiving any of the New York City Accelerator services. And there's no catch, no commitment required on your end. So everyone's journey through the program is very different. And as I mentioned previously, it's really customized to your needs. So we can provide you as much assistance as you need or as little as you need, depending on your capacity and your ability to perform those measures. So just to give you a snapshot of what the typical customer experience is, you learn about the program and you would reach out through email or through the general program hotline. You would then be paired with a dedicated account manager, and this account manager would have an initial call with you to determine what your needs are and sort of what goals you hope to achieve with your building. We would then do an analysis looking at the data that we have within our system. And so this is looking at how your building is performing, if you have a letter grade, if you have any exposure to local law 97 fines. And this is really just internal information that we've collected through publicly available resources. And we will then do an analysis to determine what the best course of action is. Once we have that discussion, we will decide on ECMs or energy conservation measures, meaning we would work together to determine what projects you would like to take on through your building. And then we would help connect you to service providers who can actually perform the work. So just to clarify, the New York City Accelerator program does not install measures and we do not perform energy audits. However, we do facilitate access to contractors who are licensed and have the skills to perform those services. And we would then layer in access to incentive programs, so ensuring that you reduce the upfront costs of that project by leveraging all the available resources throughout New York City. And lastly, you would implement the measures and we would stay in touch. We can be involved and be helpful for as long as you would require our services. That said, I just want to jump into solar in New York and give you an overview of how solar works right here in New York City. So the New York City Accelerator solar program has serviced and helped more than 200 buildings to go solar or to install solar on their roof. And typically the way the process works is you would get in contact with the program, we would conduct a solar feasibility assessment, really just determining whether or not your roof is a good fit for solar. And then we would conduct an analysis to determine what the potential savings would be and give you all the information you would need to make a decision of whether or not solar is a good fit for your building. Once you make that determination, we would provide you with the necessary information to identify all the incentive programs that are available to you. And my colleague Jose will go into more detail as far as what incentives are available and what types of financing is available for solar here in New York. We can then provide you with assistance conducting a competitive procurement. So this is most ideal for property owners or portfolio managers if you have a large number of buildings and you'd like to get a competitive bid, or you'd like to have one contractor perform all the installs. We can help you develop an RFP and then solicit bids from qualified contractors, and then help you make sense of what the differences are in terms of the bid, and help you make the right decision. And then we would provide you with support in terms of permitting and installation. So we would be involved with you and walk you through the process from start to finish. So in this slide, I just want to give you an overview of the pricing, or how solar costs have evolved over the past decade. As you can see in the graph to the left, back in 2010, the cost of solar was close to $6 a watt. And this is, looking at a national average of what the cost of solar is. And over time, as you can see, the cost has really ratcheted down significantly. And today we're, about a little bit over $1 a watt, which is considerable, thinking about it's only been a decade and the cost has really, come down by such a significant amount. And so in terms of why solar is important in New York, in New York City, buildings account for about 70% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is unique to New York, as we have a very reliable and good transit system. And so majority of the emissions are not from cars, as it is in other markets, but it's really from the buildings. And so if you look at the importance of solar in this context, solar has the ability to reduce emissions from buildings. And so by increasing the amount of solar in New York City, we're actually making a very targeted impact in New York City's greenhouse gas emissions. If you look at the graph or the map on the right, that map showcases the different power plants that exist throughout the 5 boroughs. So if you look at the yellow dots, those all represent fossil fuel electric generation plant. And these plants are typically located within low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods where people of color are majority residents. And so by investing and making investment in solar, we're able to reduce the burden on these frontline communities because the more clean energy we put onto the grid, the fewer hours that these power plants are required to run. And so that reduces local emissions, but also in general has a big impact in overall community health and public health as well. And in this graph, I just want to highlight that New York City has one of the oldest grids. It's actually one of the first electric grids in the world. And so because this infrastructure is really old and clunky, I think it's really there's an onus on us to provide new investments into the grid and provide new generation onto the grid. And so investments in solar are a direct way of making that impact, in that solar is clean energy, and it's delivered right where the use is. And so we're not sending transmission over a long distance, and we're using sources that are not fossil fuel fired, and so we're reducing the amount of emissions. And then the chart on the right just highlights some key statistics regarding green jobs in New York. And so investments in solar, typically increase the amount of green jobs, and not necessarily just in solar, but if you look at energy efficiency, there's a significant amount of investments in that sector, and there are a large number of jobs that are coming online as a result of that. And so making an investment or a commitment to go solar will enable you to sort of fuel and create new job opportunities for in the green workforce. So another benefit of solar, I think the benefits that I've covered really cover items that are not required by law or have no direct connection to the law. But there are some benefits to adding solar as it relates to complying with various local laws. So as part of the Climate Mobilization Act, which was passed in 2019, local laws 92 and 94 established a sustainable roofing zone. And this requires that new construction as well as significant gut rehabs would have to either install a green roof or would have to install solar on their roof. In addition to that, Local Law 97, which is also a part of the Climate Mobilization Act, requires that buildings 25,000 square feet or above reduce their emissions to certain limits. And solar is a great strategy to enable you to reduce your building's emissions to be within those limits set in Local Law 97. So there are benefits in addition to cost saving and environmental benefits as well. And that said, I'll hand it over to my colleague Jose to talk more about the technology.
Awesome. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jose, and I am a solar specialist with the New York City Accelerator. And it's my pleasure to speak to you about solar energy technology and how it works. So hopefully we can learn a thing or two together today. So solar energy technology is essentially composed of two main parts. The solar panels themselves, which usually are located in New York City landscape on top of a building's roof, and the inverters, which is what converts the electricity that the solar panels are absorbing from the sun, converting it from direct current to alternative current. And in New York City, this electricity goes back to the grid. So the panels get the electricity from the sun, goes down to the inverter, which then is sent back to the grid to get that form of that solar technology back in the form of energy credits. So how does it work? During the daytime, while the sun is shining, you're producing a lot of electricity, and then you're using that electricity in real time. And then all of the excess electricity goes back to the grid, and you will receive that in the form of a credit on your energy bill. So similarly, during the summer months, when you are producing much more electricity, during the winter time, you have created a bank of energy credits that will help offset that electricity on your bill. So you'll see the benefits of solar energy technology in about a 1-year turnaround period. You'll see like 100% of all that electricity come back to you in the form of your bills. There are some basic statistics about solar energy technology. Usually solar panels come with a 25-year warranty, but I can assure you that the solar panels themselves will outlive that warranty past those 25 years. But 25 years is what the manufacturing company will give you for that solar energy technology. So solar technology is a really great technology because it has been long lasting, it has been here, and now is the time to actually make it work for us during this time that we're living in the climate crisis. Also, solar panels require little to no maintenance. We usually suggest that people who do install solar energy technology on top of their roofs to go once or twice to that roof to see if the panels are working well, but you will get a tracking system that will help you monitor how each of the individual panels are working. So solar technology is clean, is efficient, and it requires little effort from you to go check out that roof and make sure that they are, operating. Solar technology does require direct sunlight. So we advise that when you are in the process of installing solar technology, that there is little obstructions of shades or nearby buildings that can produce shade and then can stop from the efficiency of those panels to be producing at its maximum. And in New York City, as I mentioned, how it works, it's grid connected. So you would put the panels on top of your building's roof, and then that electricity will be sent back to the grid. So the grid acts as your battery backup. Battery technology is developing, but not so for us in New York City is a little bit difficult, and it's a little bit more, it's very not cost efficient to do battery technology at the time. So having the grid, the solar panels connected to the grid is also great because now you're seeing you have a battery backup in some sort of way. Additionally, I do want to mention that when there is a blackout, the inverter will shut itself down. So that means that the system will stop working, not because the panels are also stopping working, but because you don't want to, in the case of having to repair that solar energy like that, the grid, the utility line at that moment, you don't want that worker to get electrocuted because of that system. So once the grid comes back live, your system will start operating again. There are three types of solar energy systems and that work in New York City, and that are the most common. The first one is a ballasted array. A ballasted array is a low-profile system. It works on very large roof spaces where you can have, many solar panels, and then just they basically require no penetration on top of that roof. They're just held down with cinder blocks that basically essentially are producing electricity for you, and it's really easy to move if you need to do roof repairs on top of that building. The second one is a planar array. This one is for space-constrained roofs, smaller roofs, mid-sized roofs, and if you want to maximize efficiency, then a planar array would be what we would advise for you to go forward with. And this one do require some mechanical attachments, so you will have to perforate the roof and anchor those systems on top of your roof. So in that case, if you are going to do a planar array, it is suggested that your roof is in really good conditions, or that or if you're at the process of renewing your roof, like redoing some roof development, that's the time that you can, do a planar array, because that system will live with that roof for the lifetime of the system, and also ideally for the lifetime of the roof. And then the third one is a canopy array. And the canopy array system, this one is raised 9 feet to 13 feet above the roof floor. So it means that you can use the roof underneath as much as you need, or if you want to use it as some buildings have used it as like they want to have a deck and they want to make sure that they maximize the roof space as well. So they tend to use canopy arrays. These ones tend to be a little bit more expensive, but it's worthwhile if you want to use the roof for other reasons. So those are the three types of solar designs that exist or that are common here in the city. Of course, we can get creative and figure out other alternatives if you have parking spaces where you can put, solar panels. But for city roofs and buildings, these are the three most common that you will see around. I do want to point out that for a planar and a ballasted array, we have to sustain the 6-foot path landing according to the New York City's fire department code. So you have to have a 6-foot path landing from the front of the building to the back of the building, and anywhere where there is an exit point. So when you do a planar or a ballasted array, you have to keep those 6-foot path landing. So in that case, it reduces the amount of solar that could go on top of that roof, because you're using, you're including mechanical structures on top of your roof. But if you use a canopy array, in this case, you can maximize the whole roof for solar, because you're still sustaining that 6-foot path landing. And now we're going to give some space for Q&A for anybody who has questions so far up to this point.
In my neighborhood, you could just go up on my roof and walk all down the block on the roofs. They're all the same height. The buildings are all the same. Is there some concern? Oh, I see this person has a fence. Like, would I have to be worried about, like, people come and make graffiti on my bulkhead and stuff? Are the panels tough, or like, do I have to worry about people ruining them?
So personally, I have not seen any vandalism in solar in New York City, and many of the buildings that we have worked with. Through the accelerator, we have helped about 200 buildings, and as a solar expert through nonprofit Solar One, we've done over 700 buildings. And in none of our cases, we have seen that there has been vandalism regarding solar in New York City. And in terms of fencing, we have not also seen that it has been a requirement. If it's a very large installation, like that it has, so correct, then maybe fencing would be some requirement, but I don't think that that's the case in New York City buildings.
We are looking at replacing our roof and doing solar panels at the same time. Would the panels help protect the roof and extends the life?
Yes. So what happens is that once you have a new roof and you put solar on top of that roof, so the solar panels actually help your roof to extend its lifetime, because the solar panels are protecting the roof from UV light, and that helps, to sustain the roof's lifetime. So usually a new roof and solar is the perfect marriage, because you will have solar panels that come with a 25-year warranty, and the roof comes with that anywhere between 20 to 25-year warranty. So by the time that you're ready to either replace the roof or replace the system itself, then is the perfect match.
We have a couple of questions that's from online. So one of them, great question, does this solar program, so NYC Accelerator, also offer services for commercial only or residential only?
We mostly focus on multifamily buildings, in the New York City Accelerator, buildings that are anywhere from 5,000 square feet and above. So usually these tend to be multifamily buildings, all kinds of buildings though, from co-ops to condos to commercial buildings to nonprofit buildings to houses of worship to schools, anywhere that you can think that solar may be fitting, we are here to help.
Wonderful. And then we have folks online asking about recording and slides. Can you remind folks that?
Yes, we will be sharing slides, the recording of this presentation with all of you.
When the grid is down, you still be able to utilize the energy from the solar.
So the clear answer is no, not at that moment, because when the grid is down, the solar system will automatically shut off with the grid. Once the grid comes back live, then you will be able to use that energy from that solar system. If you had battery backup, then perhaps yes, but as I said, for New York City buildings at the moment, is not something that is a trend. It's not, we're not there yet.
We have to where
You could have, there are some models of for resiliency purposes where that's the case. However, it's pretty, at this moment, it's pretty high cost and expensive that I don't think it would make sense for you to do it unless that from the goodness of your heart, you want to go through all the permitting and the bureaucratic permitting process, then perhaps we can help you figure that out. Go ahead, sir. There are models for community shared solar through, by using all of the extent of all of your roof space. And we can speak about that in much later about it. We're going to dabble into that conversation in a little bit. But yes, essentially, yes, you can. Ideally, we start with the common area first, because that's when you get the most return for your buck. So that's part of the whole solar energy assessment. So what happens is that once that you are ready to go solar, part of what we do as part of our services is that we do have a site assessor that will come to your roof and see whether your roof could sustain a solar project. And he's not, our assessor is not necessarily an engineer per se, but has a lot of expertise in just understanding how your roof looks like and what conditions it looks like. When we help you put the RFP or the request for proposals on your behalf, we add all of that information into that document. So when we receive bids, installers know what to expect. And once you have selected an installer, they will have to come back to site and they will give you an honest assessment on what needs to be done to make that roof solar ready or whether it cannot sustain it. But usually roofs in New York City are able to sustain solar technology because of the load. So there's a maximum load, there's a load requirement for New York City buildings roofs, and the solar technology doesn't even reach the third of what is required. Yeah. There's always like a load per square feet that is required by New York City that your roof has to sustain. And the solar would not even reach the third of what you could actually put. So the question is, can you do a canopy on a landmark building? We would have to get very creative with it. So in a landmark building, you're not allowed to build a canopy that will alter the character of that building's historic condition. So if that canopy system is not visible to a human eye from any area of that building, perhaps you can install a canopy system towards the back of that building that nobody can see that there is a canopy system, and then the building can preserve its historic character. If you were to want to do a canopy system from front to back, then the answer is no. The ballasted array so can a ballasted array be designed in a more vertical manner in order to make it more, to reduce the footprint? The ballasted array essentially, not really, because you have the mechanical structure that is anchored down with cinder blocks. So you need to have that inter-row spacing in order to make that ballasted array, be ballasted. Otherwise, it would have to be a planar array, which it has to be mounted, and then the panels can go up at an angle. Yes, we will be speaking about what can you get a form of tax credit write-up by using solar? We will speak about the incentives in just a little bit about why solar is such a great technology to look into right now. Okay. Go ahead.
The buildings south of their pretty higher than the story.
So the building this case is a building to the south is 2-story higher than their building, which is 4-story above. So as long as the building to the north does not have any shade on their roof, then it will be fine. But if the building to the south of that building to the north will be getting shade from the building to the south, the building on the south will be getting shade from the building on the north, which is the 4-story. That building may have some shading problems. So, I hope that made sense.
How as an engineer or like my role in building one expectation system and also this what as an any consulting company solar, what kind of study system they are using, identify the building is more proficient to solar compared to fee or other kind of like how the payment will be most nearest.
So the first one is, what is your role as an engineer in terms of as a building engineer? What would be your role working with a solar contractor to make that happen? So the solar installer themselves, they also have their team of engineers, and if you are very involved with your buildings, essentially you will work hand to hand with them to make sure that they're abiding by any requirement that particular building has. So you can work either with that team, and then you can find that perfect partnership to make sure that you guys are working together. Then the second one was like, why solar technology is, what are the tools used by solar to assess the benefits of solar technology in terms of like making the net savings or the making match, like if I understand your question. Yeah, what tools? So so there's different tools that can assess the shading. Personally, we use one called Helioscope, but there's AutoCAD, there's many others. Solar installers have their own way of assessing solar technology. And we also help and communicate with the solar companies. And all of that is taken into consideration. So we look at the shadings of buildings adjacent to it. We look at structures on top of that roof. What shading is being produced by different, bulkheads. And then we can help. That's how we design systems to understand where, solar can fit and where solar does not. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now I'll pass it back to my colleague Simon, who will do a viability quiz.
Great. Thanks, Jose. And great questions. So in this next section, we'll try to look at what makes a roof a good fit for solar. And I think this will address some of the questions that have come up over the past few minutes. And through this portion of the presentation, we'll do sort of a more of an interactive session where I'll ask a question and we'll be able to get some feedback. And I know there's some engineers out in the audience, so no pressure. But it's really just to get a sense of, all the information that we provided, how is that helping you to think about solar in a different way? So that said, I'd like to show an example of a building that actually has solar installed. So this building is, by virtue of having solar installed, someone made a decision that this was a good fit for solar and that it has certain attributes that make it a good fit for solar. So just going through some of those key attributes. The first is that solar, as Jose mentioned, likes direct sunlight and minimal shading. So if you take a look at this roof, there's very minimal shading. I think in the southwest corner, there's some shading from the bulkhead. In the northeast corner, there's some shading from the HVAC unit. But really, the roof in itself is very clear, has very minimal obstructions, and has no shading from adjacent buildings. So that makes it a really good fit for solar. Another item to point out is that the building has a relatively new roof. And so this is going back to what Jose mentioned, the solar panels really, once installed, they're set in place for 20 to 25 years. And this is not to say that beyond the 25 years, the system would stop generating electricity. In fact, it would go, it can go as long as you'd like to have it up there. The only issue is that the production levels decay over time because the panels are exposed to the elements. So, throughout the different seasons, the ability to generate electricity declines year over year. And it's really, 0.5% on average every year. But beyond 25 years, the production is below the certain level that the manufacturer can guarantee. So it's only guaranteed up until 25 years, but you can extend that for as long as you would. So that's why Jose mentioned that it's a good fit to have a new roof or relatively new roof and solar, because once the solar is installed, you would not like to disturb it or have to remove panels to replace or resurface the roof, because there's some costs involved in that as well. And then the other item to mention is the mechanical units. So this building, you can see it has one mechanical unit isolated in the northeast corner of the building. This is great. I think some buildings have multiple mechanical units, and that limits the amount of space that you can use towards the solar array. And there are also FDNY rules around how much space you would have to leave around the mechanical unit. So it's not just the footprint of the mechanical unit, but it's the allowances that FDNY requires that would really mitigate the amount of solar that you can install. The other key points are that it's a large flat roof that makes it ideal for solar. And then if you factor in the fire paths that Jose mentioned, the 6-foot fire paths that are required by FDNY, it really limits the amount of solar that you can install. And so having a larger roof with minimal obstructions makes for a great candidate for solar. So that said, just to give you an overview of what we do for the initial screening. So if you give us a call, you provide us with your address. We usually do a quick analysis on Google Maps where we look at the building through an aerial image and determine whether or not there's any issues that we can spot at that point. So we're looking for shading issues. We're looking for any mechanical units on the roof. We're looking for all these things that I had mentioned previously to determine, yes, no, is this a good fit for solar? or does this require some additional digging? We also ask at the point where you reach out, we would have a conversation around the roof age. How old is your roof? Do you currently have a roof warranty? And the warranty is important because roof warranty companies would allow solar, but they have very strict requirements as far as what you would have to do in order to add solar and maintain your warranty. So typically they require a pre and post inspection, a pre-inspection to verify the condition of the roof, and then a post-inspection to verify that your solar install did not impact the roof in any negative way. And so by virtue of that, you can continue with your warranty. So that said, I'd like to move to the quiz portion of the presentation. So if you take a look at this image, there are two roofs that are highlighted in yellow. Just by a show of hands, how many of you think those two roofs are a good fit for solar? No one. Okay, great. And you're perfectly correct. These roofs are not a good fit for solar. So just to highlight why they're not a good fit for solar, they're both sort of sandwiched in between two buildings that are taller. And so that mitigates or impacts the amount of direct sunlight that the buildings would get. And also you can see in this section, there's, oh, sorry about that. Okay. So if you can see in this section, there's a bulkhead, and it seems that there's additional mechanical equipment. So that really doesn't bode well for these two buildings. Yes. Yeah. So for the audience online, one of the in-person audience members mentioned that, factoring in the 6-foot requirement with FDNY, that further limits the amount of space that these buildings can allocate for solar. I'm not sure. I mean, it would have to be a very specific case and arrangement, but Jose. Yeah, so for the audience online, my colleague Jose just mentioned that it would not be feasible to borrow or lease roof space from an adjacent building because the solar systems actually have to power or have to be sited on the same tax lot or the same building that that is looking to install these systems. So for the second building, same thing, show of hands. How many think this building is a good fit for solar? Okay, great. So there's a lot of you think that this building is a good fit, and the answer is that it's a maybe. And the reason why it's a maybe is, one of the key things is that there's no direct, the building has great access to direct sunlight, but because the building has its, sort of a narrow roof, that limits the amount of solar that you can put, factoring in the 6-foot paths that FDNY requires. In addition to that, it seems that the building has somewhat high parapet walls around the perimeter, and that again could provide some shading issues. So the reason why it's a maybe is because this could be a great candidate for a canopy where the canopy is above 9 feet, and so that mitigates any impact of the 6-foot requirements for FDNY, and so you can actually build to the full print of the building. And another benefit is that the canopy would go above and beyond the parapet walls, so that would further reduce any impact from shading. Yeah. It's any street-facing side, so you would have to provide a pathway front to back, and so if the building, in this case, the law would be required for the front of the building and a pathway to go back. And Jose, you can feel free to jump in if there's anything else to add there.
to allow. So we'll look at touch base on our top values, but usually the pricing for solar, it's based on design and system size. So canopies tend to be a little bit more, much more expensive compared to ballast installation if you're comparing apples to apples, same size, same type of installation, because it requires anchoring and mechanical structure to go up. And so. Yeah, so I would say, let's say, baluster installation, is $250 per watt, then you would say that that case would be about $375.
Great. And so for the last quiz, show of hands, how many think this building is a good candidate for solar? Okay. So we had somewhat fewer hands than we did in the previous example, but survey says it's a good candidate. So the reason why this is a good candidate is, I think the really obvious one is that it's a large roof. And so a larger roof can always allow you to mitigate some of the issues that we've identified. And then another reason why it's a good fit is that there's very minimal shading. It seems that there's minimal shading from the trees in the back, as well as the impact of shading from this building is really shielding or is really felt primarily by this building. And so less so the area that's shaded in yellow. We do have a bulkhead that could have some shading potential, but the fact that there's so much usable roof space, leads us to be a good candidate for solar. But obviously, with all these buildings, further analysis would need to be done to evaluate and make a final decision on whether or not it's a good candidate. So just in terms of giving you additional tools that you can use to determine whether or not your building is a good fit, we just want to point out this New York solar map that was developed by CUNY. It's a free resource that's available online, and it's very simple to use. You plug in your address, and it gives you an analysis, or it gives you a report indicating how much solar you can install on the roof. And these are, estimates. You would have to contact a professional to really drill down to the exact size. But this gives you a good indication if there's any huge red flags in terms of shading issues or sufficient roof space to be able to host a system on your roof. And that said, I'll hand it over to Jose to talk through the cost savings.
Cool. So now the fun parts begins to speak about how we can save money with solar. All right. So just to address one of the questions that was asked by the audience regarding pricing of solar, what is included in the cost of solar? So solar is usually priced at $1 per watt. And what does that include? Includes the contract and screening. So that means that once you have selected an installer, basically they will sell you a turnkey installation from contract process all the way till the final inspection. So it includes the design, the application to the different bureaucratic entities like the New York City Fire Department, the utility company, NYSERDA, the Department of Buildings, all of that part, they will create all of the permitting applications, and they will submit that permitting process until like buying the equipment, installing the system on top of your roof, all the way till they get the inspection sign off. So basically, once you engage with a contractor, a solar contractor, they are basically selling you a system that will be generating electricity on top of your roof, and that you will be seeing the credits be turned back into your bill, and that you will be getting the benefits of solar throughout the lifetime of that system. The cost of solar, as I said, depends on the size and the design of the system. So usually ballasted arrays tend to be cheaper than a canopy or a planar array because it requires less mechanical structures to be on that system. There's not many anchoring, not so much attachment, sometimes attachments, no steel, not a lot of aluminum that goes into it, because they're just sitting there on the roof, held by cinder blocks with the solar panels and then the other parts that are important to that equipment. Also, something that impacts the solar cost is the height of the building. So the taller the building, the harder it is to get the solar panels on top of that roof. So that may have a significant impact in the cost of that system. And then sometimes installations require some buildings, who are very conscious about dignified labor and wage. They may require prevailing wage requirements, which can also affect the cost of what your system will end up being. And then if you want to get creative with like canopy systems or a combination of both types of designs, that can also alter the pricing of your system. But there are ways to mitigate, those types of costs. And one of them is like the work that we do through the New York City Accelerator, which is that we can do bulk procurement, bulk procurement for that installation. So we can put an RFP on your behalf in combination with many other buildings that want to go solar at the same time. Then it becomes much more competitive because installers will want to bid on those projects because it's a larger amount of electricity that they will be able to install on different roofs, or like projects that they will be installing on different roofs. Also, the competitive procurement assistance that we provide helps installers to want to bid on your project, because now they're not just offering you, a proposal alone. Now they know that they have other competitors in the market, so they will tend to bring their pricing down for you. So what we do is like really help you to get affordable solar on your roof. And that's like the essence of our work, especially for affordable housing. We're really committed to making that happen throughout the city. These are the solar incentives as they are now, and I want to run them through with you because I want you to understand that solar is really cost effective at the moment. And this will be maybe changing in the very near future, but this is what it is today. There are several incentives for different buildings in New York City. As we understand, there's all kinds of building typologies in the cities, from co-ops and condos to rental market rate buildings to nonprofit rental buildings, or just nonprofit buildings that don't pay property taxes. There are several incentives that these different types of buildings can take advantage of. The best case scenario for all of these buildings, like we'll say, like let's start with a co-op and a condo. So if you live in a co-op and a condo, there are incentives that you will take advantage of. The first one is the New York Sun incentive. This is an incentive, it's a rebate program that is offered by the state to help pay for the system cost. So there is the total cost of the system that will be quoted to you by the installer. Then there is the New York Sun incentive, and then there is the upfront cost. So right now, for solar installations that are under 200 kilowatts on top of your roof, which is majority of New York City buildings, the state will help you pay $1.20 per watt for that system. So if, let's say your system was quoted at $4, now the state will help you pay with $1.2 per watt. So now you're only responsible to pay for that system about $280. That will be your upfront cost, right? So the state just help you reduce that amount that you would have to have cash at hand. That's for all building typologies under 200 kilowatts systems. Anything between 201 to 1 megawatt is $1 per watt, and anything about 1 megawatt will be 50 cents per watt. But I don't think that would be the case for New York City buildings. I haven't seen like a 1 megawatt yet. The other incentives that the co-ops and condos can take advantage of, and these ones are distributed as of now through the shareholders, is the federal tax credit. Today, the federal tax credit will be 26% of the upfront cost. So out of that, like $2.80 multiplied times the size of your system, you will be able to claim 26% for the federal tax credit distributed amongst the shareholders of that building. For the state tax credit, is 25% of that upfront cost. And if your building pays property tax abatement, it pays property taxes, then you can get a property tax abatement at 20% for that for the upfront cost of that system that must be claimed over a period of 4 years. This is for co-ops and condos. The federal and the state goes directly to the shareholders. The property tax abatement goes to the co-op itself, and in the condos, it will go to the shareholders because each shareholder pays their own property taxes. For market rate buildings, they can still claim the New York Sun incentive, so the state will still help pay for the upfront, for the total cost of the system, like help, and that goes directly to the installer. And then they can claim the federal tax credit, which today is at 26%. And they can also depreciate the system if available at the federal and the state level. And if those buildings also pay property taxes, then they can claim that incentive as well. So that's how a lot of like market rate buildings are, creating solar electricity on their buildings because they want to claim the incentives and also provide clean energy to their tenants. Yes. So the question is like, if something happens before the 25 years? Yeah. So, no. No. Once you pay, because this is a contract between you and the installer. So the question is like, what happens if something happens, like a natural disaster takes away the solar panels? Can you still benefit from the federal and the state and the property tax abatement incentives? Yes, because you already paid for that system to the installer. So that's what determines your incentive level. So you already had the solar panels installed. The installer got the New York Sun incentive. You already paid that installer for the system's upfront cost. Now you can realize the federal tax credit, the state tax credit, and the property tax abatement because you already fulfill your role as the new owner of that system. But I will say that we have had a lot of hurricane, big storms in New York City, and the solar panels have like 100% of the roofs. They have still been there because these panels have to be designed that they can sustain about 120 mile per hour wind, and we haven't gotten there yet in New York. And then the last one, that for nonprofit rentals, you could only essentially get the New York Sun incentive, which helps pay for the total cost of the system. And if you design the system through an LLC, like that, you create a separate structure that you may be able to claim the federal tax credit. However, I do want to share that right now there is a discussion of the Inflation Reduction Act at the Congress level and at the Senate level, which passed, and now it's waiting, pending approval from the White House. So once that does materialize, or if it materializes in the coming future, then the federal tax credit, which is at 26%, will go back up to 30%. So that is a really, really good news for solar. The other thing that I wanted to share is that for nonprofit organizations or rental buildings, now this can become a refundable tax credit, which means that at this moment, you cannot claim the federal tax credit if you just went solar as a nonprofit building, like an HDFC or a house of worship. Now, HDFCs or any organization like our co-ops, instead of sending the electricity, sharing the tax benefits with the shareholders, they can claim it themselves as a nonprofit organization as a refundable tax credit. So what it means is that the government will essentially, you decide to go solar, the government, if the law is signed, then the government will be giving you a check for 30% of that investment. So it's really neat what is happening with that in terms of solar technology. But this is not to say that I want you to wait to install solar, because right now is the time to go solar, because even though that at the federal level, we're speaking of a change in law and policy, at the state level, the New York Sun incentive, the $1.20, is based on megawatt blocks. So as those blocks keep filling themselves up, the incentive keeps reducing itself over time. So if you want to maximize all of your incentives, to be honest, now is the time to go solar. So I wanted to put that out there. With solar energy, essentially, you will save electricity directly through your utility bills. That's how you will see the benefits. You put the solar panels on top of your roof, then you will see the benefits in your utility bills being credited back to your account. And then you will essentially, over a year worth period, as I had mentioned before, you ideally will be at $0 paying back to the utility, except for the interconnection fee that is for everybody. Also, the way that credits are determined are based on the type of account that your building has. And there are several accounts in New York City. It's a very nitty-gritty process that we can have a conversation later on about how that goes. And I'd be happy to sit with you over the phone and speak with you for an hour about it, or less. And then the way that solar is distributed in the city, as there was a question before, usually the lowest hanging fruit is the common area, because that's something that everybody shares. So in New York City, we live in a complex multifamily environment. There are many apartments with sharing only one roof. So it would be very difficult to give electricity to everybody in that building. So the common area is the lowest hanging fruit. That's what everybody uses, laundry rooms, elevators, hallways. So we would design and help you size a system that would ideally offset 100% of that common area, or partial percentage of that common area first. But if you have a roof that is much more larger, then we can size a system size where you could share the benefits with with the individual units. It wouldn't be like 100% of every unit, but a little portion of it. Perhaps you can see some credits come back to them. And there was a question before, I'm like, can another roof lease the space for the building who doesn't have space, like solar, who's space constrained for solar? You could, but then that other building, what would be doing is that they would be sending the electricity to another, would need to at least 10 accounts to send that electricity, but they would be sending that electricity to another account, but then that other account would be basically buying the electricity at a discounted rate for that. Solar savings, usually you'll see the actual benefits of solar anywhere between 5 to 12 years is when you see the real benefits of solar, of the payback without credits and with credits. And that means the tax incentives. Incentives, of course, help you, pay back for the system much more faster. And now with the hopefully passed law, you can have the refundable tax credit. It will be even quicker. And, a great solar project, again, past 12 years, I would, be a little bit worried to recommend solar, but there's many buildings who really just want solar, and we help them out as well. And then, as we've been mentioning, the solar panels will still be operable after 25 years. They will be producing at 90, 88% efficiency past those 25 years. It's just that you won't have a warranty by that time. Yes. Usually your building already has insurance. So your building should have already insurance, and that will be, and you would add the panels to your building's insurance, which is not going to be much different than, like, it's not going to increment your, Yes, correct. Yeah, so the question was like, there is a fire in the building. What happens to my panels? Are they insured? The question is that the answer will be that the building usually is already have insurance, and all you have to do is add the solar panel as another technology to that insurance. It wouldn't alter the cost of your insurance because the panels would not be like a much more larger addition to what your policy already, absorbs. Yep. Awesome. So how to finance solar? There's several ways on how to finance solar. The first one is the best option to reap all the benefits is through cash purchase. You own the system, you pay it up front with your own reserves, or do a collection of money through your shareholders, get it there. You'll see the benefits come back to you much more faster. The other way is through a loan, and that's the cash purchase option. The other one is through a third-party provider, where you can have a power purchase agreement with a solar investor. And what they do is that they own the system itself. And so they will be owning the system. They will sell you the electricity at a lower discount for leasing the roof to them. And then they get the federal tax credit. They depreciate the system, while your building will receive the state tax credit, the property tax abatement if you're paying any property taxes, the lower discounted pricing, and also the new thing is that you can also claim the carbon credit for local law 97, which helps you avoid carbon taxes. And then the third one, if there is no way that you can have solar, there's always the option of subscribing to a community solar project somewhere else in the city, where there are many options, and we are happy to connect you with one of those providers if you would like, even if it's just for your own individual residential account. So yeah, now it's question Q&A or? Okay, great. So I'm just gonna rush through not rush, but like go through the other sections of the presentation. This is the case studies, and then we're gonna come back to Q&A. So there are some cases that we have worked through the accelerator. This one is Nostrand Avenue. This one is located in Brooklyn. It's a building whose owner is owns a market rate building. So it's a rental market rate building. The system paid off in 3 years. It is an 88.55 kilowatt DC installation. They are receiving annual savings of about $21,000. And what this owner did is that he created a much more larger system than what the common area absorbs in order to sell the electricity back to other accounts. And basically the tenants had the first option to subscribe to this system. I'm actually I don't live in this building, but I'm a subscriber to this system. And I have like a negative $257 on my Con Edison bill, because currently in the summer, the system is producing much more electricity that I can see those benefits. So for the winter time, I will be able to, have some bank credits saved up. And I pay the electricity to this owner at a 10% discount than what I would be paying Con Edison. So if Con Edison would charge me $50, I am paying $45 instead. He uses a third-party provider that helps him manage that, so he gets probably like 88%. So it's not very much different, but he gets most of it. Yeah. This is the Greenwich, which we did a solar tour recently. As you can see, the inverters are here and the panels are there as well. We wanted to give you that view. This one was also a cash purchase. It's a 31.18 kilowatt DC system. It feeds the whole common area of the buildings. So it's saving this building about $4,000 a year in common area savings. And over the lifetime, it will save them about $130,000 for the 25 years. And this one is a ballasted array. So it's just essentially just placed in the roof. This was a new roof. And we've worked with this particular property manager to help put much more solar throughout their own, the different buildings that they manage. And this one is not ours. This is through our partners with Solar One. They did this HDFC. It was the first HDFC to install solar in New York City, and proudly Solar One was the one that led this campaign. And basically, this is a combination of a canopy array, which is raised about 9 to 13 feet above the roof ground, and planar array mechanical structures that are, also mechanically anchored to the building. They are seeing the payback period in 2 years. And the reason is because this building is located in the historic district. So they hid the panels behind. And they were able to not only get the federal, the state, the property tax abatement, but also the historic tax credit, which is another incentive that is available if you're able to justify it and if you're in an income qualifying census tract area. So they paid it in 2 years. They get about $6,000 in annual savings. And they'll have like an estimated lifetime savings of $225,000. And they provide electricity for the common area and also to the residence apartment. And it's not like the whole bill for the residents, but $150 average, $200 average. That's a big chunk. It's about 3 months for some people of electricity. And this one is a work in progress. It's one of our largest installations that we're doing with the New York City Accelerator. Is Roosevelt Garden is an affordable housing market rate building, and they will be saving about $53,000 a year because it is a master meter account, and basically over the lifetime they'll be saving about $1.5 million in energy savings by doing this system. So this one right now is in the permitting phase, and hopefully by the fall we would be seeing construction on top of this roof, which is going to be really awesome. And over the lifetime, they will be able to reduce about 3,200 tons of carbon emissions, which is a significant portion for the building, not just for like, their like environmental commitment, but also saving in carbon tax credits, that carbon taxes that the city is implementing now. And basically they're offsetting over 50% of the common area usage of the building. I think this is they're going to make it an ELA building, which means that they're feeding every apartment as well together. And then again, I just want to put a word on community solar. We don't do community solar through the New York City Accelerator, but we do help you partner with our other partner organizations like Solar One, who can connect you to a community solar provider. And community solar, how it works is that there's a large installation somewhere in the city, and then you subscribe to that system through a third-party provider, like I do with my own account. And then the reason why this would work is because your roof may not be able to have solar because it's already shaded by so many structures, or because we don't own our roof spaces. Let's remember, we have an affordable housing and just housing prices in the city. About 70% of the people who live in the city are renters, and only 30% actually own. So it's really something that we need to address, but that's another larger conversation that we need to have at another setting. And this is how it works. So we will help you connect to our partner Solar One, who will then refer you to a community solar provider. It's easy to sign up. There is no commitment, to leave. It's usually a 12-month term, auto renewal. So if you leave your apartment and go to another place with the same account, you can transfer your community solar account. So it's really easy, and we'll be happy to help you with that. So now we'll open the floor for Q&As of all kinds. Awesome. So the solar installer has their own structural. So do we need a structural engineer to review a canopy system? So installers do have their own engineer team, and they will do that assessment themselves, and they will be honest about it. We also, on our end, we will come and do a site assessment preliminary to see, what the conditions of that roof are in the beginning.
The quick reminder is that the structural review will be required for all projects, not just for the canopy. So as part of the FDNY and Department of Buildings permit set is that you would have to show that the building is able to support the weight of the panels, and that's for any type of system that you install.
So essentially, you need a sign off from the Department of Building and the fire department in order to get that system on top of your roof. So thank you. So there is a question about a roof in a location where there is like new buildings being constructed with higher elevation. If they're really close to your building to the north side and it will produce shade to the south side, then I would say yes. You need to be tracking the construction of those buildings, right? Because first they have to go through a review process, and it may be a long time before they're actually in place. So you may, be able to have a solar installation that will last for a certain amount until those buildings are built. But yeah, so if you're like in Midtown, for example, it's really hard to put solar there. But if you're like in Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Upper Manhattan, or areas where there is like a ton of solar space, then why not? We'll help you. Yes. So there is a question about whether the New York City Accelerator can help a comprehensive RFP process to include solar and roof or like help with energy efficiency measures. So first of all, like just a reminder, like the New York City Accelerator is here to help you do all of the energy efficiency conservation measures that you need, and we will connect you to different providers that are doing, all of the above. We don't do the work itself, but we will help you with all of the above. So once that you enroll your building through the New York City Accelerator, you will get a personalized account manager that will work with you and assess your building's conditions from beginning to end. So they will help you like figure out what is it that you need to do to improve your building's state, to get it to the letter A that we want in the city and not have any carbon emissions. On the solar piece, the solar process, you will work with like one of the specialists like me or my colleagues, and we will work directly with you in making sure that we find you an installer that will help, either work with your with your current roofer to sustain all of those warranties. But if you're wanting to do a solar and roof at the same time, there are some installers that do both works. And if you would like that the RFP has a language that includes, we are looking for an installer that has knowledge on doing roof work or is willing to work with a roof installer that we already selected, then we are more than happy to incorporate that language into the RFP so that you can have your options open. Yes. Yes, sorry, I apologize. RFPs, request for proposals. So we go out and see bids on your behalf from qualified installers. And just mind me saying, all of these services are for free. So like we will help you and guide you through the process at no cost. Our job is to really support you in getting solar on top of your roof and make sure that you are happy with the decision of having gone solar, because we are here committed to work with you and the city to achieve its goals of going carbon neutral by 2030, 2050, ideally zero. Go ahead. You will be receiving credits on your Con Ed bill as you're producing much more electricity. So during the daytime, when you produce much electricity, that helps you build credits for the nighttime when you're not producing any electricity. Similarly, during the summer months, when you're producing much more electricity than you use, Con Edison is using that electricity that you're producing, but they're crediting you. So in the winter time, when you're not producing as much electricity, you already have built that credit. And those credits just keep accumulating and accumulating, and until, either hopefully you become much more energy efficient and you are not using all the credits, but I don't know. Under 5,000 square feet, the New York City Accelerator is really well connected to different partners that are supporting and assisting those buildings to get to their energy efficiency and conservation measures. We do 5,000 square feet because those are the ones that are being targeted by the local laws to become much more environmentally conscious. Yes. Yes. Yeah, for us, for the building square footage. Yeah, the whole building. Yeah, everything. You're at the comment. So the question is like there's a building with 5 units with low common area electricity usage, but a large roof space that could sustain much more solar. We could help you create a system that we could see the potential of distributing some of that electricity to the common area and some of the electricity to the individual units. However, how the crediting is working right now, It may not be as cost effective because you will receive less than what you would receive if you just credit back the common area. However, if your building is in the process of electrifying itself completely, then perhaps your heating system will become electric through heat pumps, etc. You're going to add washers and dryers. Then if you foresee your electricity bill to go up, then you can overbuild a little bit the system to offset that future increase.